Overthinking feels harmless. After all, you're just thinking. But according to Buddhist wisdom, overthinking is one of the most powerful causes of human suffering. It steals peace from the present moment. It turns small problems into large ones. It creates fear where no danger exists and keeps old wounds alive long after life has moved on. The Buddha taught that a disturbed mind can create more suffering than the outside world ever could. And if your mind is constantly racing, worrying, analyzing and replaying the past, then this teaching may explain exactly why happiness feels so difficult to find. Because the problem is not that you think too little. The problem is that you never stop. Lesson 1. Most of your suffering exists only in the mind. Afsapand itstafursum portal mansum. The Buddha taught that suffering does not always come from what happens to us. More often, it comes from what the mind continues to do after the event has already passed. This is one of the most difficult truths for people to accept, because we naturally believe that our pain is caused by circumstances, by other people, or by bad luck. But if you observe your own life carefully, you may discover something surprising. Many of the things that disturb your peace are not happening right now. They are happening in your thoughts. Think about a mistake you made years ago. The event lasted only a few moments, yet the mind may have replayed it hundreds or even thousands of times. The mistake is gone, the moment has disappeared, life has already moved forward. But the mind keeps returning to it, as if repeating the memory will somehow change the past. Every time the memory returns, the suffering returns with it. Not because the event is still happening, but because the mind refuses to release it. The same thing happens with worries about the future. A person imagines failure before it happens. They imagine rejection before it occurs. They imagine problems that may never come. Their body reacts as if the danger is real, even though nothing has happened. They lose sleep over situations that exist only in imagination. They sacrifice today's peace for tomorrow's uncertainty. In this way, they suffer not from reality itself, but from the stories their mind creates about reality. Buddhist wisdom teaches that the mind is constantly producing thoughts, just as the sky constantly produces clouds. The problem is not that thoughts appear. Thoughts are natural. The problem begins when we believe every thought deserves our attention. We chase one thought after another until we become lost inside our own mental world. Instead of living life directly, we live inside endless commentary about life. Imagine sitting beside a river and watching leaves float on the water. You do not jump into the river and grab every leaf. You simply watch them pass. The Buddha taught that thoughts should be treated in the same way. They come, they go, they appear, they disappear. But most people do the opposite. They grab every thought, they analyze it, they argue with it, they fear it, they become attached to it. As a result, their minds never experience rest. Have you ever noticed how one negative thought can change the direction of an entire day? You wake up feeling fine. Then a memory appears, a worry enters your mind. Suddenly your mood changes, your energy changes, your peace disappears. Nothing in the outside world has changed, yet your experience becomes completely different. This is the power of the mind. A single thought can create suffering when it is fed with attention. The Buddha understood that an uncontrolled mind is like a fire. The more fuel you give it, the larger it becomes. Every time you replay an argument, you add fuel. Every time you obsess over a mistake, you add fuel. Every time you imagine the worst possible outcome, you add fuel. Eventually, the fire becomes so large that it consumes your peace, your happiness, and your ability to enjoy the present moment. But there is good news. The same mind that creates suffering can also create freedom. The moment you begin observing your thoughts instead of obeying them, a transformation begins. You start realizing that not every thought is true, not every fear is a prediction, not every worry deserves your energy. You begin creating space between yourself and the endless stream of mental noise. This is where true peace starts to emerge, not because life suddenly becomes perfect, not because problems disappear, but because you stop allowing every thought to control your emotional state. You stop giving your mind unlimited authority over your happiness. Most people spend their entire lives trying to change the world around them. They believe peace will come when circumstances improve. They believe happiness will arrive when everything finally goes according to plan. But Buddhist wisdom points in a different direction. It teaches that freedom begins not when the world changes, but when your relationship with your thoughts changes. The greatest prison is not made of stone or steel, it is made of endless thinking. And the key to freedom has been within you all along. The moment you stop chasing every thought, stop believing every fear, and stop carrying every memory, you begin experiencing life as it truly is. Simple, present, peaceful. This is the first lesson of Buddhist wisdom. Much of the suffering you carry today is not coming from reality itself. It is coming from the mind's refusal to let reality pass. And the moment you understand this deeply, you take the first step toward a life that is no longer controlled by overthinking. Lesson 2. The mind never finds peace by thinking more. One of the greatest illusions the human mind creates is the belief that more thinking will eventually lead to peace. Most people spend years trapped in this illusion without realizing it. Whenever they feel uncertain, they think more. Whenever they feel afraid, they think more. Whenever they feel hurt, confused, or lost, they believe the solution is hidden somewhere inside another hour of analysis. The mind whispers a promise. It says, just think about it a little longer. Keep searching, keep analyzing, keep replaying the situation. Eventually you will find the answer that makes everything feel safe again. But notice what actually happens. You think about the problem for 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. Instead of becoming calmer, you become more anxious. Instead of becoming clearer, you become more confused. Instead of finding peace, you find more questions. The Buddha understood this trap deeply. He observed that the mind often behaves like a person lost in a desert who mistakes salt water for fresh water. The more they drink, the thirstier they become. In the same way, the more a restless mind searches for certainty through endless thinking, the more restless it becomes. Look at your own experience. Have you ever spent an entire night worrying about something? Maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was money, maybe it was your future, maybe it was a mistake you could not stop replaying. Hour after hour, your mind searched for solutions. It examined every possibility. It imagined every outcome. It chased every scenario. And yet when morning arrived, were you truly at peace, or were you simply exhausted? This is because overthinking rarely solves emotional suffering. Most of the time, it multiplies it. The mind begins with one question, then it creates 10 more. It begins with one fear, then it creates 20 new fears. It starts with a small uncertainty, then it transforms that uncertainty into a mountain. This is why many people become prisoners of their own intelligence. They believe that because they are thinking deeply, they are making progress. In reality, they are often moving in circles. The Buddha compared this kind of mental activity to being caught in a spider's web. The more the insect struggles, the more trapped it becomes. Likewise, the more a person desperately tries to think their way into perfect certainty, the more tangled they become inside their own mind. What makes this suffering even more painful is that certainty itself is impossible. Life has never promised certainty. The future has never been guaranteed. No amount of thinking can completely remove risk, uncertainty, change, loss, or disappointment. Yet the mind keeps demanding guarantees. It wants to know what will happen tomorrow. It wants assurance that nobody will leave. It wants proof that nothing bad will occur. It wants complete control over a world that is constantly changing. And because life cannot provide these guarantees, the mind remains dissatisfied. This dissatisfaction becomes anxiety. This anxiety becomes overthinking. This overthinking becomes suffering. The Buddha taught that peace does not come from controlling life. Peace comes from accepting the nature of life. Everything changes. Everything moves. Everything eventually passes. The moment you stop demanding certainty from an uncertain world, a tremendous weight begins to lift from your shoulders. Imagine holding a heavy stone in your hands all day. After hours, your arms ache. After days, the pain becomes unbearable. Now imagine someone asks, "Why don't you simply put the stone down?" This sounds obvious, yet many people spend years carrying mental burdens in exactly the same way. They carry old regrets. They carry future fears. They carry imagined disasters. They carry painful memories. They carry unfinished conversations. They carry worries about things completely beyond their control. And when peace disappears, they respond by gripping the burden even tighter. The Buddha's wisdom points in the opposite direction. Instead of gripping tighter, learn to release. Instead of chasing certainty, learn to trust the present moment. Instead of demanding answers from every thought, learn to observe thoughts without following them. This does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean ignoring problems. It does not mean avoiding responsibility. It means understanding the difference between wise reflection and endless mental spinning. Wise reflection seeks understanding. Overthinking seeks control. Wise reflection eventually ends. Overthinking never does. Wise reflection creates clarity. Overthinking creates confusion. Wise reflection helps you act. Overthinking keeps you stuck. Many people believe they need more information before they can feel calm. But often what they truly need is less mental noise. The clearest water is not created by stirring it constantly. The clearest water appears when the stirring stops. The same is true for the mind. When you stop endlessly chasing thoughts, clarity begins to emerge naturally. Solutions appear more easily. Decisions become simpler. Life feels lighter. Not because every problem disappears, but because your mind is no longer creating additional suffering on top of reality. This is why some of the wisest people in the world appear so calm. It is not because they have no problems. It is because they understand something most people never learn. Peace is not found at the end of endless thinking. Peace is found when endless thinking comes to an end. The Buddha did not teach people how to think more. He taught them how to suffer less. And one of the most powerful steps toward that freedom is realizing that the mind's constant demand for more analysis is often the very thing preventing the peace it seeks. The answer is not hidden in one more hour of worry. It is not hidden in one more night of replaying the past. It is not hidden in one more cycle of fear and prediction. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is not finding another thought. Sometimes the greatest wisdom is finally letting the thought go. And the moment you understand this truth, you begin to discover a peace that cannot be found through thinking alone. A peace that emerges only when the mind stops fighting reality and learns to rest in the present moment. Lesson 3. You are not your thoughts. Perhaps one of the most liberating teachings in all of Buddhist wisdom is this: you are not your thoughts. At first, this idea may sound simple. You may hear it and immediately agree with it. But if you truly understand what it means, it has the power to transform your entire life. Most people live as if every thought that enters their mind is a reflection of who they are. If a fearful thought appears, they believe they are fearful. If an angry thought appears, they believe they are angry. If a negative thought appears, they believe something is wrong with them. They become so closely identified with the activity of the mind that they never stop to question whether the thoughts themselves are telling the truth. The Buddha observed that the mind is constantly producing thoughts, feelings, memories, judgments, fantasies, worries, desires, and fears. This is simply what the mind does. It generates mental activity in the same way that the heart pumps blood and the lungs breathe air. Thoughts arise naturally. They come and go on their own. Yet most people spend their lives trapped because they assume every thought deserves to be believed. Imagine sitting beside a busy road. Cars pass by every second. Some are small, some are large, some are beautiful, some are damaged. But you do not run after every car. You do not jump into traffic every time a vehicle appears. You simply watch them pass. Thoughts are no different. They arrive, they stay briefly, then they leave. The problem begins when you chase them. The moment you jump into the traffic of your mind, suffering begins. A thought appears, I am not good enough. Instead of observing it, you believe it. Then another thought appears, I will probably fail. You believe that one too. Soon another arrives. Things will never get better. Again, you accept it as reality. Before long, a single passing thought has become an entire emotional experience. Your mood changes, your confidence disappears, your energy drops, your peace vanishes. Yet none of it was caused by reality itself. It was caused by identification. You believed the thought was you. The Buddha taught that much of human suffering comes from this confusion. We mistake the contents of the mind for our true nature. We mistake passing mental events for permanent truths. We mistake temporary thoughts for our identity. But consider this carefully. If you were truly your thoughts, then who is noticing the thoughts? Who is aware of the worrying? Who is observing the fear? Who recognizes that overthinking is happening? There is a part of you that watches the mind, a silent awareness that remains present no matter what thoughts appear. This awareness is like the sky. Thoughts are like clouds. Some clouds are dark, some are bright, some bring storms, some disappear quickly. But no cloud can damage the sky itself. Likewise, no thought can define your deepest nature unless you allow it to. Unfortunately, most people never learn this lesson. They spend years fighting their thoughts. They try to eliminate every negative idea. They try to force themselves to think positively. They battle with their minds every day. But fighting thoughts often gives them more power. The more you resist them, the stronger they become. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to stop thinking about something when you desperately want it to disappear? Tell yourself not to think about a problem, and suddenly it becomes all you can think about. Tell yourself not to worry, and the worrying intensifies. Tell yourself not to feel anxious, and anxiety grows stronger. This happens because resistance feeds attention, and attention feeds thoughts. The Buddha discovered a different path. Instead of fighting thoughts, observe them. Instead of resisting them, understand them. Instead of becoming them, witness them. When a fearful thought appears, simply notice it. When an angry thought appears, simply notice it. When a painful memory returns, simply notice it. You do not need to suppress it. You do not need to obey it. You do not need to become it. You only need to recognize it for what it is, a passing mental event, nothing more. This simple shift creates extraordinary freedom. Imagine a person standing on the bank of a river. Leaves float downstream, one after another. The person watches without grabbing them. Thoughts can be treated the same way. Let them come. Let them go. Observe without attachment. The moment you stop clinging to every thought, something remarkable happens. The mind begins to lose its power over you. The thoughts may still appear, but they no longer control your emotions. They no longer determine your actions. They no longer dictate your peace. This is the difference between being trapped by the mind and becoming free from it. Many people spend their entire lives trying to improve every thought they have. Buddhist wisdom points towards something deeper. You do not need perfect thoughts to experience peace. You need a different relationship with your thoughts. Peace does not come from controlling the mind. Peace comes from understanding the mind. The Buddha never promised that negative thoughts would disappear forever. He understood that the mind would continue producing mental activity as long as we live. What changes is not the existence of thoughts. What changes is our attachment to them. A person who is trapped by thought suffers every time the mind becomes negative. A person who understands thought remains steady even when negativity appears. This is true freedom, not the absence of mental noise, but the ability to remain undisturbed by it. Think about how much suffering could disappear from your life if you stopped believing every thought your mind produced. How many fears would lose their power? How many worries would fade away? How many painful stories would finally come to an end? Most of the thoughts that disturb people are not predictions. They are not facts. They are not reality. They are merely possibilities created by the mind. Yet because people identify with them, They suffer as if those possibilities are already real. The Buddha taught that wisdom begins when we see clearly, and one of the clearest truths we can discover is that thoughts are not the self. They arise, they pass, they change constantly, but the awareness observing them remains. When you understand this deeply, overthinking starts to lose its grip. The mind may continue talking, but you no longer have to listen to every word. The mind may continue creating stories, but you no longer have to live inside them. The mind may continue producing fears, but you no longer have to surrender your peace. This realization is not merely comforting, it is transformative, because the day you stop identifying with every thought is the day you begin reclaiming your freedom. And once that freedom is tasted, even briefly, you start to understand why the Buddha considered mastery of the mind one of the greatest achievements a human being can attain. For the greatest victory is not over other people. It is not over circumstances. It is not over the outside world. The greatest victory is recognizing that you are far more than the endless stream of thoughts passing through your mind. And from that recognition, a deeper peace begins to emerge, one that no amount of overthinking can ever provide. Lesson 4. The present moment is the only place where peace exists. If there is one reason overthinking destroys happiness, it is because it pulls us away from the only place where peace can ever be found, the present moment. This may sound simple, but very few people truly understand it. Most people spend their lives somewhere else. Their bodies are here, but their minds are not. While eating a meal, they are thinking about tomorrow. While spending time with loved ones, they are replaying yesterday. While walking through a beautiful day, they are worrying about a future that has not arrived. Life is happening right now, yet the mind is constantly escaping into another place. The Buddha saw this clearly. He understood that human beings suffer not because the present moment is unbearable, but because they rarely remain in it long enough to experience its peace. Think about your own life. How many moments have you lost because your mind was somewhere else? How many sunsets passed unnoticed because you were worrying? How many conversations were only half heard because you were trapped in thought? How many opportunities for joy disappeared because your attention was consumed by fear, regret, or anxiety? Most people assume they are living their lives, but in reality, they are living inside their minds. The tragedy is that life unfolds in the present, while overthinking keeps dragging us away from it. Imagine a person carrying a backpack filled with heavy stones. Each stone represents a regret from the past or a fear about the future. Wherever they go, they carry the weight. The backpack grows heavier every year. Eventually, they become exhausted, not because life itself is too heavy, but because they refuse to put the stones down. This is what overthinking does. It forces us to carry burdens that do not belong to this moment. A person may be sitting safely in their home, yet their mind is reliving an argument from 5 years ago. Another person may be healthy and secure, yet their mind is creating fears about what could happen 10 years from now. Neither person is experiencing reality. They are experiencing mental projections, and because those projections feel real, their peace disappears. The Buddha taught that suffering often comes from our inability to stay with what is actually happening. Instead of accepting the present moment, we argue with it. We compare it to the past. We demand guarantees about the future. We resist what is, and every act of resistance creates tension. Notice how a child experiences life. A child becomes completely absorbed in the present moment. When they laugh fully. When they play fully. When they observe something beautiful, they give it their complete attention. They are not constantly analyzing every experience. They are simply living it. This is why children often experience moments of joy that adults have forgotten. As people grow older, they lose this natural presence. The mind becomes crowded with worries, responsibilities, memories, and expectations. Instead of experiencing life directly, they experience life through endless layers of thought. The result is a constant feeling of disconnection. Even when good things happen, they struggle to enjoy them. Even when peace is available, they fail to notice it. Even when life is beautiful, the mind remains elsewhere. Overthinking creates the illusion that happiness exists somewhere in the future. The mind says, "I'll be happy when I solve this problem. I'll be happy when I have more money. I'll be happy when everything goes according to plan. I'll be happy when people finally understand me." But notice what happens. One problem gets solved, another appears, one goal is achieved, a new desire emerges, one fear disappears, a different fear takes its place. The mind keeps moving the finish line. Peace remains just out of reach. The Buddha recognized this endless chase. He taught that happiness cannot be found by constantly running toward the future, because the future never arrives. When tomorrow comes, it becomes today. And if you have not learned to be present today, you will not be present tomorrow either. The habit of mental escape simply continues. Many people spend decades waiting for life to begin. They believe the perfect moment is somewhere ahead. But while they wait, life quietly passes by. Years disappear, opportunities disappear, relationships change, time moves forward, and the present moment, the only moment they ever truly had, slips away unnoticed. This is one of the greatest tragedies of overthinking. It steals the very life it claims to protect. It promises safety, but creates anxiety. It promises solutions, but creates confusion. It promises control, but creates suffering. Meanwhile, the present moment waits patiently, always available, always here, always offering peace to those willing to enter it. The Buddha often encouraged people to return to simple awareness, to feel their breathing, to notice their surroundings, to observe the sensations of the body, not because these things are extraordinary, but because they anchor the mind in reality. When attention returns to the present moment, something remarkable happens. Many of the problems created by overthinking begin to lose their power. The imagined future disappears. The replayed past fades away. Only this moment remains. And often, this moment is far more peaceful than the stories created by the mind. This does not mean every present moment is pleasant. Life still contains challenges. Pain still exists. Loss still occurs. But even difficult moments become easier when they are experienced directly rather than filtered through endless mental resistance. A person carrying one burden can manage it. A person carrying one burden plus 1,000 fearful thoughts about the burden suffers far more. The difference is not reality. The difference is the mind. The Buddha discovered that true freedom is not found by escaping life. It is found by fully entering life, by meeting each moment as it is, by letting go of constant mental commentary, by releasing the need to control what cannot be controlled, by trusting the present enough to remain within it. The mind will always try to pull you away. It will tempt you with memories. It will tempt you with fears. It will tempt you with endless questions. But peace remains where it has always been. Not in yesterday, not in tomorrow, not in endless analysis, not in constant worry. Peace exists only here, only now, only in this moment. And the more deeply you understand this truth, the less power overthinking will have over your life. Because eventually you realize that the present moment is not merely where life happens. The present moment is life itself, and those who learn to live within it discover a peace that cannot be found anywhere else. Lesson 5. Letting go is not losing. It is freedom. Perhaps one of the most misunderstood teachings in Buddhism is the idea of letting go. Many people hear these words and immediately feel uncomfortable. They assume that letting go means giving up. They think it means becoming passive, abandoning their dreams, stopping caring about people, or accepting whatever happens without effort. Because of this misunderstanding, they continue holding tightly to everything in their lives, believing that attachment is the same thing as love, control is the same thing as security, and constant thinking is the same thing as responsibility. But the Buddha taught something very different. He taught that attachment is often the hidden source of suffering. The tighter we cling to things, the more afraid we become of losing them. The more desperately we try to control life, the more anxious we become when life refuses to obey us. The more tightly we hold on to people, outcomes, expectations, memories, and identities, the more fragile our peace becomes. This is because everything in life changes. Everything, no exception. Relationships change, people change, circumstances change, health changes, fortunes change, emotions change. Even the person you are today is not the same person you were 10 years ago. Yet despite this reality, the mind constantly tries to make things permanent. It wants certainty in an uncertain world. It wants permanence in a temporary world. It wants guarantees where none exist. And because life can never provide what the mind demands, suffering begins. Imagine holding a handful of sand. If you keep your hand open, the sand rests peacefully in your palm. But the moment you squeeze your fist tightly, the sand begins slipping through your fingers. The harder you try to hold it, the faster it disappears. Life works in much the same way. Many people lose their peace not because they lack something, but because they are trying too hard to keep it. A person becomes attached to a relationship. Soon fear appears. What if they leave me? What if they stop loving me? What if something changes? The relationship itself may be healthy, but attachment creates anxiety. Another person becomes attached to success. They constantly worry about failure. Every setback feels devastating. Every mistake feels personal. Their happiness depends entirely on maintaining a certain outcome. As a result, peace becomes impossible. Another person becomes attached to how others see them. They spend years seeking approval. They fear criticism. They avoid being authentic. Their entire emotional state depends on opinions they cannot control. Again, suffering appears. Notice the pattern. The suffering is not coming from the object itself. It is coming from the attachment. The Buddha observed this truth again and again. The problem is not loving people. The problem is believing they must never change. The problem is not pursuing goals. The problem is believing your worth depends on achieving them. The problem is not enjoying life. The problem is believing life must unfold exactly according to your expectations. Overthinking grows directly from attachment. The more attached you become, the more your mind races. The more attached you become, the more you worry. The more attached you become, the more scenarios you create. You begin mentally rehearsing future disasters. You imagine every possible loss. You search endlessly for certainty, and yet certainty never arrives. This is why overthinking and attachment are deeply connected. One feeds the other. Attachment creates fear. Fear creates overthinking. Overthinking creates suffering. Suffering creates even stronger attachment, and the cycle continues. Many people spend years trapped inside this cycle without realizing it. They think they are protecting themselves, but they are actually imprisoning themselves. The Buddha taught that freedom begins when we stop trying to possess what was never ours to possess. Think about nature. The seasons change without asking permission. Flowers bloom and fade. Leaves grow and fall. Rivers flow. Clouds appear and disappear. Everything moves according to its nature. Nothing remains fixed. Nothing remains permanent. And yet nature exists in perfect harmony with this reality. Human beings suffer because they resist it. They demand that changing things remain unchanged. They demand that temporary experiences become permanent. They demand certainty from an uncertain world. The result is endless disappointment. Letting go does not mean refusing to love. In fact, it often allows you to love more deeply. When attachment disappears, fear loses its grip. You stop loving people because you need them to complete you. You begin loving them because you genuinely appreciate their presence. You stop clinging. You stop controlling. You stop demanding. You simply value what exists while it exists. This creates a far healthier relationship with life. The same is true for success. When attachment fades, effort becomes lighter. You still work hard. You still pursue goals. You still strive for growth. But your peace no longer depends entirely on the outcome. You understand that your value exists independently of success or failure. You do your best and release the rest. This simple shift removes enormous amounts of suffering. The Buddha never taught people to stop participating in life. He taught them to stop clinging to life. There is a profound difference. Participation is healthy. Clinging creates pain. Participation allows flow. Clinging creates resistance. Participation creates freedom. Clinging creates fear. Most people are carrying emotional burdens because they refuse to let go. Some are holding on to resentment from years ago. Others are holding on to guilt. Others are holding on to regret. Others are holding on to versions of themselves that no longer exist. Others are holding on to expectations that reality has already disproven. They continue carrying these burdens because they believe letting go means losing something important. But often the opposite is true. What they lose is suffering. What they lose is mental exhaustion. What they lose is unnecessary pain. And what they gain is freedom. Imagine carrying a heavy bag for years. Eventually, the weight becomes normal. You forget what it feels like to walk freely. Then one day you finally put it down. The relief is immediate. The lightness surprises you. You wonder why you carried it for so long. This is exactly what happens when people learn to let go. The mind becomes quieter. The heart becomes lighter. Life becomes simpler. Not because circumstances become perfect, but because resistance decreases. The Buddha understood that peace does not come from controlling life. Peace comes from cooperating with reality. Reality changes. Reality moves. Reality flows. And those who learn to flow with it suffer far less than those who spend their lives fighting it. This is why letting go is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is not surrendering your life. It is surrendering your struggle against life. It is not giving up. It is waking up to the understanding that nothing can be permanently held, permanently controlled, or permanently secured. And once you stop demanding permanence from an impermanent world, something extraordinary begins to happen. The fear starts to fade. The overthinking begins to slow. The constant need for control weakens. And in the space that remains, peace quietly enters. Not the fragile peace that depends on everything going your way, but a deeper peace. A peace that remains even when life changes. A peace that remains even when uncertainty appears. A peace that remains because it no longer depends on holding tightly to anything. This is the freedom the Buddha pointed toward. Not freedom from life, not freedom from change, not freedom from challenges, but freedom from the endless suffering created by attachment. And once this freedom is understood, even in a small way, you begin to realize that the things you were desperately trying to hold on to were often the very things preventing you from experiencing peace. Because sometimes the greatest step forward is not gaining more. Sometimes it is finally learning how to let go. Lesson 6. The mind becomes what it repeatedly thinks about. One of the most important truths the Buddha discovered is that every thought leaves a trace. Most people imagine thoughts as harmless things that appear and disappear without consequence. Because they cannot see thoughts with their eyes or touch them with their hands, they assume thoughts have little power over their lives. But Buddhist wisdom teaches the opposite. The mind is shaped by what it repeatedly focuses on. Every thought strengthens a habit. Every habit strengthens a pattern. Every pattern eventually becomes a way of living. This means that the quality of your life is deeply connected to the quality of your attention. Whatever you consistently feed grows stronger. Whatever you repeatedly return to becomes familiar. And whatever becomes familiar eventually starts feeling like reality. This is why two people can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different lives. One person focuses on gratitude. The other focuses on resentment. One focuses on possibility. The other focuses on fear. One focuses on learning. The other focuses on regret. Years later, their inner worlds look completely different. Not because life treated them differently, but because their minds were trained in different directions. The Buddha understood that the mind is like a field. A farmer cannot plant weeds and expect flowers. Likewise, a person cannot spend years feeding fear, anger, worry, jealousy, resentment, and negativity while expecting peace to grow. Whatever seeds are planted most often will eventually dominate the field. This is why overthinking becomes so dangerous. Most people do not realize they are training their minds every day. Every time they replay a painful memory, they strengthen that pathway. Every time they imagine a fearful future, they strengthen that pathway. Every time they obsess over what someone said, they strengthen that pathway. Every time they return to self-criticism, they strengthen that pathway. At first, these thoughts seem insignificant, but repetition gives them power. A single drop of water appears harmless, yet over time, water can carve through solid stone. Thoughts work in exactly the same way. The mind becomes shaped by what it experiences repeatedly. Consider someone who spends years worrying. At first, they worry only occasionally. Then it becomes a habit. Eventually, the mind begins worrying automatically. Even when there is no problem, it searches for one. Even when life is peaceful, it looks for danger. Even when everything is going well, it imagines what might go wrong. The mind has been trained to expect trouble. It no longer knows how to rest. Many people believe they are simply being realistic, but often they are experiencing the result of mental conditioning. The mind has practiced fear for so long that fear feels normal. The mind has practiced anxiety for so long that anxiety feels natural. The mind has practiced overthinking for so long that silence feels uncomfortable. This is one reason so many people struggle with stillness. When everything becomes quiet, they immediately reach for distraction. They check their phones. They turn on television. They start worrying. They create problems. They replay conversations, anything to avoid sitting alone with their minds. The Buddha noticed this tendency thousands of years ago. He observed that an untrained mind constantly seeks stimulation because it is afraid of stillness. Stillness reveals the patterns that have been running unnoticed for years, and many people would rather remain distracted than face those patterns directly. But true freedom requires awareness. You cannot change what you refuse to see. Imagine carrying a backpack for decades. You become so accustomed to the weight that you forget it is there. Then one day someone points it out. For the first time, you realize how heavy it has become. Only then can you choose to put it down. The same is true for mental habits. Most people never notice how often they criticize themselves. They never notice how frequently they imagine worst-case scenarios. They never notice how much time they spend reliving the past. These patterns become invisible because they are familiar, but familiarity does not make them healthy. The Buddha taught that awareness is the beginning of transformation. The moment you become conscious of a pattern, you create the possibility of change. Before awareness, the pattern controls you. After awareness, you can begin choosing differently. This is why mindfulness is so powerful. Mindfulness is not merely relaxation. It is not simply feeling calm. It is the practice of observing the mind clearly. When you observe your thoughts, you begin seeing patterns that were previously hidden. You notice how often fear appears. You notice how often judgment appears. You notice how often comparison appears. You notice how often the mind drifts into imaginary futures or painful memories. This awareness can be uncomfortable at first. Many people are shocked by how noisy their minds actually are. But awareness is not a problem. Awareness is a gift, because once you see the pattern, you no longer have to remain trapped inside it. The Buddha often emphasized that transformation occurs gradually. People frequently want immediate results. They want decades of mental conditioning to disappear overnight. They want instant peace, instant wisdom, instant freedom. But the mind does not change that way. A tree does not grow in a single day. A river does not carve a canyon overnight. And a mind shaped by years of overthinking cannot be transformed in a single afternoon. Patience is essential. Every moment of awareness is a step forward. Every time you observe a thought without following it, you weaken an old habit. Every time you choose presence over worry, you strengthen a new habit. Every time you release resentment instead of feeding it, you change the direction of the mind. Small actions repeated consistently create enormous transformation. This truth can be seen everywhere in life. A person becomes physically strong through repeated exercise. A musician becomes skilled through repeated practice. A language is learned through repeated study. Likewise, Peace develops through repeated awareness. Wisdom develops through repeated understanding. Freedom develops through repeated letting go. The challenge is that most people underestimate the power of small mental choices. They think one fearful thought does not matter. One resentful thought does not matter. One anxious thought does not matter. And by itself, perhaps it does not. But repeated thousands of times over years, it becomes a way of life. The mind gradually becomes what it repeatedly practices. Fortunately, this truth works in both directions. Just as negativity can be strengthened through repetition, peace can be strengthened through repetition. Just as fear can become a habit, courage can become a habit. Just as anxiety can become familiar, calmness can become familiar. Just as overthinking can become automatic, presence can become automatic. This is the hope found within Buddhist wisdom. You are not trapped forever by your current patterns. Your mind is not fixed. Your habits are not permanent. Change is possible. Growth is possible. Freedom is possible. But it begins with understanding that every thought matters. Every moment of awareness matters. Every act of letting go matters. The person you become tomorrow is being shaped by what you repeatedly think today. If you continually feed fear, fear will grow. If you continually feed resentment, resentment will grow. If you continually feed anxiety, anxiety will grow. But if you continually nourish awareness, compassion, gratitude, presence, and wisdom, those qualities will grow as well. The Buddha did not teach that happiness arrives by accident. He taught that the mind can be trained. He taught that suffering can be reduced. He taught that peace can be cultivated. And perhaps most importantly, he taught that every person has the ability to participate in that transformation. No matter how restless your mind has become, no matter how long you have struggled with overthinking, no matter how deeply certain patterns seem rooted, the possibility of change remains, because the mind becomes what it repeatedly thinks about. And the moment you understand this truth, you gain something incredibly powerful. You gain responsibility for the direction of your inner world. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of your thoughts. You begin becoming the gardener of your mind. And when the garden is tended with awareness, patience, and wisdom, peace slowly begins to bloom where suffering once grew. Lesson 7. The greatest freedom comes when you stop needing control. If there is one lesson that brings together everything the Buddha taught about suffering, it is this: the deepest peace arrives when you stop trying to control what was never yours to control in the first place. Most people spend their entire lives fighting reality. They fight the past. They fight the future. They fight uncertainty. They fight change. They fight loss. They fight aging. They fight mistakes. They fight other people. They even fight themselves. And because of this constant struggle, their minds rarely experience rest. The strange thing is that many people do not even realize they are fighting. The struggle has become so normal that it feels like part of life. From the moment they wake up until the moment they fall asleep, the mind is trying to manage, predict, calculate, prevent, control, and secure every possible outcome. It wants guarantees. It wants certainty. It wants assurance that nothing painful will happen. It wants promises that everyone will stay. It wants proof that the future will unfold exactly as planned. And because life refuses to provide these guarantees, the mind remains trapped in anxiety. This is where overthinking is born. At its core, overthinking is often an attempt to control the uncontrollable. The mind believes that if it thinks enough, worries enough, analyzes enough, and prepares enough, it can finally eliminate uncertainty. But uncertainty is woven into the fabric of existence itself. No amount of thinking can remove it. No amount of planning can destroy it. No amount of worrying can prevent it. Yet millions of people spend years exhausting themselves trying. Imagine standing on the shore of the ocean and demanding that the waves stop moving. Imagine becoming angry every time the tide changes. Imagine spending your entire life trying to force the sea into perfect stillness. Such a task would be impossible. No matter how hard you tried, the ocean would continue being the ocean. Life works in exactly the same way. Change is its nature. Uncertainty is its nature. Movement is its nature. Impermanence is its nature. The Buddha understood that suffering begins whenever we demand that reality becomes something other than what it is. A person falls in love and immediately begins fearing loss. A person achieves success and immediately begins fearing failure. A person gains wealth and immediately begins fearing poverty. A person experiences happiness and immediately begins fearing sadness. Notice what is happening. Instead of enjoying what exists, the mind becomes obsessed with protecting it. Instead of appreciating the moment, the mind starts worrying about its end. Instead of living, the mind begins guarding. This is one of the hidden tragedies of attachment. People become so focused on preserving life that they forget to experience life. They become so obsessed with controlling outcomes that they lose touch with the present moment entirely. The Buddha taught that true wisdom is not found in controlling life. It is found in understanding life. And once life is understood, a profound shift begins to occur. You stop demanding certainty. You stop demanding permanence. You stop demanding guarantees. You begin accepting reality as it is. This acceptance does not make you weak. In fact, it makes you stronger than most people, because strength is not the ability to control everything. Strength is the ability to remain peaceful, even when you cannot. Consider a bamboo tree during a storm. The rigid tree resists the wind. It fights against every gust. Eventually, it snaps. The bamboo bends. It moves with the storm. It adapts. It remains flexible. And because of this flexibility, it survives. Human suffering often comes from being mentally rigid. People create expectations about how life should unfold. They create images of how people should behave. They create plans about how the future should look. Then reality arrives with its own plans. Reality ignores their expectations. Reality follows its own path. And because they are attached to a particular outcome, disappointment becomes inevitable. The Buddha repeatedly pointed toward a different way of living. Instead of resisting reality, cooperate with it. Instead of demanding certainty, cultivate trust. Instead of clinging to outcomes, focus on your actions. Instead of controlling the future, fully inhabit the present. This simple shift changes everything. Imagine carrying a heavy chain for years. Every link represents something you are trying to control. Someone's opinion, someone's behavior, the future, the past, the economy, your reputation, the choices of other people, the passage of time. The chain becomes heavier and heavier. Eventually, it drains all your energy. Then one day you realize something extraordinary. You never had control over most of those things anyway. The burden was never necessary. The weight was self-imposed. And the moment you understand this, you begin setting the chain down. This is what freedom feels like. Not because life becomes predictable, but because you stop demanding predictability. Not because uncertainty disappears, but because you stop fearing uncertainty. Not because change ends, but because you stop resisting change. The Buddha observed that much of human suffering comes from wanting life to provide impossible promises. People want relationships that never change, bodies that never age, success that never fades, pleasure that never ends, security that never disappears. Yet everything in existence is temporary. Everything flows, everything transforms, everything eventually passes. This truth frightens the ego, but it liberates the wise, because once you accept impermanence, you stop being shocked by it. You stop expecting life to stand still. You stop treating change as an enemy. You stop seeing uncertainty as a threat. Instead, you begin moving with life rather than against it. The mind becomes lighter, the heart becomes calmer, the spirit becomes freer. Many people spend decades chasing peace. They search in achievements. They search in possessions. They search in status. They search in relationships. But peace remains elusive because they are looking in the wrong place. The Buddha taught that peace does not come from arranging the outside world perfectly. Peace comes from transforming your relationship with the outside world. This is a profound difference. One path depends on controlling circumstances. The other depends on cultivating wisdom. One path leads to endless frustration. The other leads to liberation. Think about how much energy is wasted trying to control things beyond your reach. How many sleepless nights, how many anxious thoughts, how many imagined scenarios, how many fears, how many regrets, how many mental battles. Now imagine redirecting that energy toward acceptance, awareness, compassion, and presence. Imagine how different your life would feel. Imagine how much lighter your mind would become. Imagine how much peace would emerge. This is not merely a philosophical idea. It is a practical transformation. Every moment you release the need to control something beyond your reach, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. Every moment you accept reality instead of fighting it, suffering decreases. Every moment you trust the unfolding of life instead of demanding certainty, peace grows. The Buddha did not promise a life free from pain. No wise teacher could make such a promise. Pain is part of being human. Loss is part of being human. Change is part of being human. But suffering created by resistance is optional, and much of that suffering disappears when the need for control is finally released. Eventually, a person reaches a point where they understand something extraordinary. The future has always been uncertain. Life has always been changing. Nothing was ever truly guaranteed, and yet somehow life continued. The sun continued rising. The seasons continued changing. The heart continued beating. The journey continued unfolding. They realized that the peace they were searching for was never hidden in perfect certainty. It was hidden beneath the constant demand for certainty. The moment that demand falls away, peace reveals itself, quietly, naturally, effortlessly, like a lake becoming still after the wind has stopped, like clouds parting to reveal the sky that was always there, like waking from a dream and seeing reality clearly for the first time. This is the final lesson. The greatest freedom does not come from controlling life. The greatest freedom comes from trusting life enough to stop trying. The greatest freedom comes from releasing the endless mental struggle. The greatest freedom comes from letting reality be what it is. And when that happens, overthinking loses its power. Fear loses its grip. The restless mind grows quiet. And in that silence, something precious finally appears. Not the temporary happiness that depends on circumstances, not the fragile peace that depends on certainty, but a deeper peace, a lasting peace. The peace the Buddha spent his life teaching, the peace that has been available to you all along, the peace that emerges the moment you stop fighting life and start living it. The Buddha never taught that life would be free from challenges. He never promised a future without pain, loss, uncertainty, or change. What he offered was something far more valuable. He showed that while we cannot always control what happens to us, we can learn to stop creating additional suffering within our own minds. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. Your unhappiness is not always caused by your circumstances. It is often caused by your attachment to thoughts about those circumstances. The mind replays the past. The mind fears the future. The mind searches endlessly for certainty, and in doing so, it overlooks the only moment where peace has ever existed, the present moment. Today you learned that overthinking is not wisdom. It is not clarity. It is not preparation. More often, it is a habit that keeps the mind trapped in fear, doubt, and unnecessary suffering. You learned that thoughts are not facts. You learned that peace cannot be found through endless analysis. You learned that letting go is not weakness but freedom. You learned that the mind becomes what it repeatedly focuses on. And most importantly, you learned that true peace begins the moment you stop trying to control everything and start accepting life as it is. Take a moment right now and ask yourself, how much of my suffering comes from reality, and how much comes from the stories I keep repeating inside my mind? That single question has the power to change your life. Because the moment you become aware of the prison, you also begin discovering the exit. Remember this: the sky does not fight the clouds. The ocean does not fight the waves. The forest does not fight the seasons. Everything in nature flows according to its own rhythm. Only the human mind insists on fighting what already is. And perhaps true wisdom is learning to flow with life instead of against it. So tonight, before you sleep, Give yourself a gift. Put down the worries you cannot solve. Release the fears you cannot control. Let go of the burdens you were never meant to carry. Allow your mind to rest. Allow your heart to breathe. Allow yourself to simply be. Because peace is not something you must chase. Peace is what remains when chasing finally ends. If this teaching touched your heart, let us know in the comments. What is one thought, fear, or worry you are ready to let go of today? And if you enjoyed this journey into Buddhist wisdom, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more timeless teachings that bring clarity, peace, and freedom to everyday life. Until next time, take care of your mind, protect your inner peace, and remember, the quieter the mind becomes, the more clearly you can hear the wisdom that has been within you all along.